Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, here, of course, with the Trashman, who's just now home from Houston, Texas. Lovely Houston, Texas. Beautiful weather this time of year, I'm sure, Trashman.
Went from the arid heat of Austin to the balmy heat of Houston.
It is heat dome, dude. It just
100 degrees plus either way.
It just won't leave us, but it doesn't matter because fantasy football season is here. If you have drafts this weekend, please make sure you've downloaded the most recent version of your specific cheat sheet, whether that's for PPR, standard, half-point PPR, or Superflex. We've updated them all coming into the weekend. As always, we'll maniacally continue updating all of the cheat sheet products and utilizing all this information that we learned from these various training camp stops. At the end of the whole thing, if you count up the camps and the joint practices that Cody, Trashman, and Byron have been to, we're looking at over, I think I counted like 19. There were 19 teams that we've got to be around, which is our biggest accomplishment as far as a training camp tour so far in the history of the company, dating back to 2011, 2010. When did we start this? 2010, 2011? I think our first year on radio was 2011. Regardless, it just a smashing success, and that's because of the support of our pro members. We could not do it without you guys. So here's the information that you need from Trashman's couple of days down there watching the Houston Texans and the Miami Dolphins. Trashman, just a general sense, was it like, did you get to see, how were the practices? You got to see some actual decent practice at this one, right?
Yeah, I did. Got to see a lot of 11 on 11 drills, a lot of red zone drills from both teams. Miami was a little bit harder. The visual was a little bit harder on some of their offensive drives, at least, some of the 7-on-7s.
The what was a little harder?
To see the Miami's offensive movements on some of the 7-on-7 drills, just because they were on a different field than the Texans offense. That wasn't the visibility wasn't quite as good.
Did the Miami media that traveled have better access to that? Or was it just the Houston Texans media just gave everybody who was there that same line of view?
Miami had a different area, and I went over to the Miami area, but it still just wasn't, you're on the end of the end zone on either side. What for the Texans, you were kind of more midfield.
I know. I know that portion that you're talking about. So they were over in that portion where they butted up against the outside of the indoor facility. They were out there on that side, like on the back side. Yeah, that's hard to see over there. Okay. Well, I guess let's start. Do you want to start with Miami then? Let's just start with them. So you said that Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson, were they both back at practice? They've both been missing some time through the beginning part of camp.
They were both back in practice. Mostert looked spry. Mostert looked good. Jeff Wilson a little less dynamic, and that's kind of what we were expecting. But Mostert looked good in that battle. He was the de facto number one. He played exclusively with the first team. Jeff Wilson worked in after him. Devin Achane, he worked predominantly with the second and third team. He got a few snaps with the first team, but they were few and far between. They were
was it just gadget snaps? Oh, passing down snaps.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is that kind of in keeping with what we've seen from the preseason, that Achane's playing into the fourth quarter of these games?
Yeah.
So he's a backup.
It seems so. Mostert looks good. He looks like the number one. Jeff Wilson, maybe a 1B. But yeah, Achane right now, he's intermittent at best.
So all the hope that everybody had with Dalvin Cook signing with the Jets and this freeing up things for Achane, is that kind of hope in your mind displaced a little bit? Is that misplaced hope? And are you actually now becoming interested in a Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson?
I'm pretty interested in Mostert. Achane, I mean, I was actually happy when I saw him get a few snaps with the first team, because it took a while. It wasn't until the second day that I saw him work with the first team.
If you just, if you just look, man, it feels like so we've gotten ever since the first preseason game, we've kind of gotten a little bit down on A-Chain where we're not getting him as much anymore, right? And that was one of the main things that I wanted to kind of hear from you, because not only does it have to do with A-Chain, who I think through the course of the season should be able to do something, right? But I mean, golly, like Raheem Mostert's going off the board as a running back like 5. I mean, where is he? 152 to 1 kind of 60-ish area. That's a player who I've seen in the drafts that we do in these simulations that is still available sometimes in 12-team leagues in the 12th and the 13th round. It feels like at that point in a draft, he feels gross, right? It's not something you're going to run to Twitter and have a screenshot saying like, look who I got in the 13th round, right?
Yeah.
But at that point in the draft, it could be a value, unless you think that this is just going to be would it be a 3-way committee, or is there any appetite for like Salvin Ahmed, and they still have Myles Gaskin, who looked good in the preseason game.
I saw Salvin Ahmed get enough touches to where, I made note of it.
Is this just going to be a whole committee?
I do think that Mostert is the 1A. It seems like he was the guy on the field the most. He was the guy who made, and when they had drives that actually moved down the field, and there was one drive in particular where it was pretty much just Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert, and actually Durham Smythe that were.
Oh, play the song.
I mean, it was. I mean, I'm just saying what I saw on Smythe. When there was a tight end involved in the passing game,
I don't care about Smythe. Hey, Trashman. Do you think though? Just tell me, after being there, watching these guys closely for 2 days of practices, what do you think about this general theory that is being bandied about? And I know you don't listen to fantasy football content or get on Twitter or even care about this stuff, but one of the narratives that we've heard people say is that maybe Jeff Wilson would be the guy to target if you're targeting one of these running backs late, because A-Chain has a skill set so much like Mostert. And if that skill set were to get bitten into, it would get bitten into by a guy like A-Chain, more so than Jeff Wilson, that doesn't seem to have a redundant asset there right behind him in the same way that Mostert does. Because Mostert and A-Chain are a lot alike. Does that just not?
I didn't see that.
Okay.
On field, I don't think they didn't seem that much alike to me.
How is Raheem Mostert that much? Because I thought that was a good comp coming out before he even went to the Dolphins.
Mostert looked considerably, bigger than A-Chain.
That's the thing about A-Chain. They're close to the same size, but the thing about A-Chain that you notice, he has small hands, he has short arms. He's just not a big man, is what we would talk about when we were analyzing him as a prospect.
Yeah, they look like two entirely different players to me on the field.
But A-Chain always played bigger than he looked.
I almost felt the opposite. I almost felt like Wilson and A-Chain had looked more similar on the field than Mostert. Mostert looked like in between the tackles, power runner.
Okay, well that's interesting to know. Do you want to get some Raheem Mostert at the end of your drafts? I mean, would you rather have him over one of these back? I mean, who would you rather have between Raheem Mostert and, like, say, I guess you'd rather have him than like a Tyjae Spears?
Yes,
for sure,
absolutely.
Okay,
based on these two practices that I've seen,
I don't think we need to talk much about the wide receivers. We all know that Waddle's awesome, but he's hurt. What are you going to tell me about Tyreek Hill? You could tell me
exactly.
You could tell me you look terrible out there, and I just tell you to shut up.
Tyreek Hill. I mean, like, honestly, it was a musical chairs behind Tyreek Hill.
I don't think it matters. Just out of curiosity, what is it? Berrios? Yeah.
But he actually, I think he tweaked his ankle on the final day.
He's hanging out too much with Christian McCaffrey on those yachts during the offseason. He's picking up that injury bug. Okay,
probably so. But otherwise,
what are they dating? What are they dating each other?
Craft, who are getting snaps.
Aren't they dating two girls that are like sisters or something?
No clue.
Yeah, there's something like that if you cruise the TMZ side.
But Berrios looks a little bit like a McCaffrey.
Oh yeah, dude.
And he kind of walks around with a swag.
Yeah, man. Yep. You remember Barrios at the Senior Bowl? Whenever you kind of meet that guy, dude, he thinks he's a big dog. He definitely does.
He walks around like it.
Yeah. Okay. I don't care about the tight ends. I don't care about the third wide receiver. Did you see anything from Tua? Anything just noteworthy of passing along?
He was up and down. They had one drive in particular where they moved the ball field quickly. They had no trouble moving the ball on the Texans defense, but in integral situations, like they got into the red zone and then he threw a pick six. So it was kind of inconsistent from Tua, at least throwing the ball. Running the ball, he looked good. He's a bigger guy than you would think up close. Thick to the trunk.
You had never seen him live on an NFL field yet, huh?
No.
Okay. Huh. All right. But he looks fine, right? I mean, you see him getting interviewed. He seems like he's pretty confident and stuff with all the jiu-jitsu he did in the offseason.
He looks confident. The thing is, this offense is predicated on Hill and Waddle being out there. And without one of those guys out there, the offense doesn't really have a phase.
Got it. Okay, what about Houston? I think that the biggest takeaway from this is Raheem Mostert, and I'm going to be making a little bit of a shuffling move with him during those sort of, I call it kind of like one of the little hinterland areas of the cheat sheet where in an area where we might not generally get guys. It feels like there are certain areas that coalesce where there's like pockets of players you can choose between and stuff. But it feels like Raheem Mostert's a player that we can get there in that same kind of. It sounded like he should be ahead of these clear backups like Tyjae Spears, Ty Chandler. This kind of guy.
Absolutely.
Okay, what about the Texans? First of all, how does C.J. Stroud look in that first preseason game? I have to admit, it looked a little bit disappointing. He didn't have quite the placement and the touch that I was hoping to see, but it was then again the first time that the lights came on for him. Did you see anything? What I don't want to lead you. What did you see?
Stroud looked good for the most part. Some of the deep throws weren't quite on. So I can kind of see what you're saying there, but he looked confident in the pocket. He worked. I was most questionable about his, I guess, demeanor under pressure, because I feel like that was a question for Stroud.
Was there a lot of pressure?
There was a lot of pressure.
Because if you look at that Miami front seven, it's actually good. Like whenever I made the strength of schedule tool and you analyze who those players are, you analyze what they're getting paid, you analyze what our scouting evaluations were of them generally and what their relative athletic score is just as a unit. That's a good front seven. That's a good front seven with players who are coming on. But on the other side of it, what you hear from, Texans people is that if the center, oh God, who's the center they took in the second round? Juice Scruggs.
Yeah.
If Juice Scruggs can come along, they still have Kenyon Green, who they liked as a first round pick. They have Titus Howard, who just got paid with the big contract. They have two really good tackles. I mean, the offensive line should be coming along, and that's one of the things that gave me a little bit of hope about Stroud. I'm not sure that comparing him against that Miami front seven is the most meaningful thing, because that projects to be one of the better front sevens in the league, at least based on our internal analytics for the matchup tool. He was under a lot of pressure. The offensive line wasn't holding up well. I
mean, it wasn't the offensive line so much. I think when pressure got to him, it was usually a safety. And I think he handled himself well under pressure. I don't know that I saw any interceptions from Stroud, where I can't say that for Davis Mills. Davis Mills was abysmal. Stroud was the best quarterback on the field for the Texans by far.
Yeah, well, geez, I would hope so. Is it? But so are you comfortable? Here's the real question: are you comfortable with Stroud as your quarterback too in super flex if you get caught in a bad pickle?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's largely predicated on the fact that he has Dalton Schultz and Tank Dell there underneath.
Okay, well, so Tank Dell, I'm sure. Just give us the Tank Dell propaganda.
I mean, Tank Dell. I mean, it's impossible not to catch Tank Dell fever out there watching them.
Some of the media caught it too.
Yeah,
the local media.
yeah. I mean,
What
it
are they
was just
saying?
uncanny. Just his ability to get open. His cuts are just so decisive. He was just breaking dudes' ankles left and right and catching those outs in the end zone multiple times. At least 3 touchdown catches that I saw in red zone drills for Tank
With
Dell.
the ones?
That's who they looked for. That's
With the
who's trying to
ones?
look for in the end zone. It was Tank Dell and then Dalton Schultz.
With
Dalton
the
Schultz had a
ones.
really nice one-handed grab in the end zone.
But this is with the ones, right?
This is with the ones.
Well, I mean, CJ Stroud asked for him specifically.
Yeah, I mean, and he uses them.
He called him.
And the thing is,
he called him and said, like we're about to take you.
It's his weapon. It's his secret. It's not a secret weapon. It's his openly admitted weapon. Thing is, the Texans still don't know who their starting receiver group is.
So break that down for us then.
Almost every receiver that they have on the roster played with the ones at some point.
Who played most? Who do you think it is? Who does the media?
It's probably Robert Woods, Tank Dell, and Nico. Those are the guys I saw on the field most, but also saw a lot of Steven Sims, saw a lot of Xavier Hutchinson, but it was Dell, Collins, and Woods that were on the field the majority of the time for the Texans.
Does Tank Dell come off the field in 2 wide receiver sets?
He did. Less so on the second day. Less so on the second day. First group of 11 on 11, second day, Tank Dell was out there with Robert Woods.
Yeah, and he was being used. I know at least last week in the preseason game, he was being used on the outside, especially down there in the red zone when he caught that. Not a back corner fade, but like a side kind of pylon fade, right?
Yeah, and those are the throws that he was getting. That
he is lethal with that damn whip route like that. Where like you said, man, he the way he gets open, it sounds like he looks just like he did at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. Looked exactly the same.
Which is funny because at the Senior Bowl we said, he weighs 165 pounds. He's not going to be able to do this at the NFL level. And as we're projecting it, we're saying he can't do it. He can't do it. We're like, if he could do that at the NFL level, of course he'd be a first round pick. But it's like he's not going to be able to do that versus an NFL defense. And you get to hearing that the Texans sort of see him as a Deshaun Jackson or a Marquise Brown, and we said at the Senior Bowl doing those broadcasts, we said, like, if he's going to reach his potential, he's going to have to be that kind of outlier, that kind of maniacal outlier that just is, a guy that feels like he can just lead his body to play.
Like it was almost like he was like an Amon-Ra St. Brown.
So are you now to the point where you're like, so I know you play in a ton of leagues. You play in seriously high stakes leagues. And I feel like the leagues that we play in, that we played in since we were in college together and stuff like that, are super important to us. We care a lot about them. Are you going to be taking Tank Dell in these leagues?
Absolutely.
In redraft?
Absolutely.
When? I need to know when to take him.
Whenever I can. I don't think he's that high of priority for most people right now.
No,
so I feel like
he's not. He's going undrafted.
If I can get him in the 9th round of our keeper league, I would be elated.
But Trashman, that's the thing right now. If you want to, if you're doing a simulation of just a normal home league, you can get him in the 14th round right before you take kicker and defense.
And I will be taking him in the 9th round of my keeper league if I can.
So Trashman, coming into this weekend again, it's a big weekend for fantasy drafts. Like the guy who I've liked to build into the cheat sheet is sort of a couple of guys I've liked to build into the cheat sheet is sort of like last round wide receivers. If you need a little bit more depth there, maybe Van Jefferson, who we've heard a lot about the breakout coming from him. Another Senior Bowler who we really loved coming out, a guy who's finally stepping up into a true number 2 role. The team situation sucks, but they should be throwing from behind a lot of the time, I would think. A lot more focus on a guy like Cooper Kupp than there will be on a guy like Van Jefferson. And then, of course, Jaden Reed, who we saw at the Senior Bowl this last year, who I liked better than Tank Dell at the Senior Bowl, simply because I thought he was a little bit more versatile. But now that he's in the NFL, he's coming off the field in 3 wide receiver sets for sure, right? For sure. Because the guys who they have out there in 2 wide receiver sets for the Packers are going to be Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. If that first game could tell us anything, it told us about Jaden Reed's role. Now that Tank Dell, he's with another young quarterback in his first year as a starter. I know Jordan Love's not a rookie, but they're both first-year starters. They're both kind of unknown quantities at this point. Would you prefer taking a swing on Tank Dell at the very end over Jaden Reed or Van Jefferson, or at least having that as an option to you?
Yes.
Well, all right, so you'd be interested in having it as an option to you. If you're on the clock and you need a wide, say you've taken 5 wide receivers and you just like one more in a league where you say you start 3, would you take Van Jefferson, Tank Dell, or Jaden Reed?
Tank Dell.
Okay.
I mean, it's just his star power is palpable watching him out there on the field. I do think he's going to lead the Texans in receiving. I feel like Nico Collins, he's redundant out there with Dalton Schultz in the red zone. You're expecting Nico Collins to get his, to get his nut in the red zone. They didn't even look to him in the red zone. It was Schultz and it was Tank Dell.
You like Schultz. You like Schultz too.
I love Schultz. I love Schultz. I'll take him as a streamer any day of the week. Out there for Texans offense, the players I'm drafting are Schultz, Dell, Pierce, and to a lesser extent, Singletary.
Well, all right. So tell me about just that. Finally, just that dichotomy with those two, Singletary and Pierce, because it appears to me from what I've seen just in the practice clips, and I know that those can be deceiving sometimes, but man, you see a lot of reps with CJ Stroud passing the ball, working on routes with Dameon Pierce. We know from our time scouting him, seeing him live, what a maniacally good pass catcher he is. It kind of betray his body and his general style is just this slashing, big, ball of knives runner. It betrays the fact that he's a really naturally good pass catcher, framer of the football, really good hands. That to me makes you think like, well, what do I want Singletary for? It feels like he's just Dameon Pierce's backup.
He looked like, and I actually talked to Dameon Pierce after he came to the podium yesterday. Super nice guy, great guy.
Oh yeah,
and I asked him about his role in the passing game. I asked him about his role in the passing game. I was like, do you feel like the Texans are involving you a lot more in the passing game this offseason? He said, definitely. So like, that's why I've lost so much weight, because he's running all these routes.
He?
Yeah. He's still a big guy. He's still a big guy. He still does, he looks like he did at the Senior Bowl. He's still a big guy, but he is being involved a lot more in the passing game than he was last season.
Which is of just such importance when we talk about a team that is projected to only win, what was it, 4.5 games, 5.5? What's their win total? 4.5, 5.5? I don't have it pulled up right now. When we're talking about a game, about a team with that kind of win total, we're projecting game scripts where they're going to be behind, and you don't want to just pound the rock kind of between the tackles, between the 20s kind of runner. You need somebody that's going to be involved not only in that 2-minute, that 4-minute offense, but also a guy if they have to drop back and throw the ball and stuff like that, you want to be an outlet in the passing game, especially in PPR. So I think that that's an important thing to hear about Dameon Pierce for sure. But you said that maybe to a certain degree Singletary too. So where does that come from? Why?
Singletary, he actually worked quite a bit in the red zone drills.
Why?
Just as a receiver. I really don't think, because they don't know who their receivers are yet outside of Dell, nobody's really standing out. I feel like they're using Singletary kind of like a secondary receiver, but he's still playing behind Pierce. He's still playing well behind Pierce, and Pierce is involved in the passing game. I think Devin Singletary will get usage though.
sort of a jack of all trades, master of absolute zero.
Yeah.